We are on the eve of Game 4. And this is the big one. This is the big one. And it really honestly is. So going into Game 3, I felt that if the Blues lost Game 3, you've still got the next one at home. If the Bruins lost Game 3, the pressure would be huge. Now, the problem with that theory, I admit there's a problem with that theory, is St. Louis has struggled at home these entire playoffs. They have struggled to remain at 500. And not only that, but if you look all the way back, so we go all the way back to the reviews I was doing for St. Louis games back in January when they were at the bottom of the league, I pointed out part of the reason they were at the bottom of the league was because they were terrible at home. The interesting thing with St. Louis was they had a heavy home schedule to start the season, and they were bad in it. And then when they started playing more on the road, they got better. Now, in the playoffs, we've kind of seen not the same thing because they're in the Stanley Cup Finals, but at home, there's some struggles. So with the Bruins up 2-1, now is the time to turn that around. In Game 3, we saw Bergeron get a goal and 2 assists. That is unacceptable if you're a St. Louis fan. And that 4-for-4 power play by Boston on 4 shots is probably not the way to do it. I'm used to seeing that on like an EA Sports game, but a real hockey game, that's news to me. Charlie Coyle had a goal and an assist. Johansson had a goal and an assist. Torrey Krug, a goal and 3 assists. Amazing game for Krug. Achari and McAvoy both had 5 hits. Moore only played 13 minutes and 9 seconds. Pasta had 5 shots on goal. For the entire playoffs, Tuukka Rask now sits at a 1.91 goals against and a 939 save percentage. Believe he was at 938 going into the last game. Now on the other side of the board, Maroon, Blais, and Bozak were all -2 in the last game. I agree, plus minus is a terrible stat. But in one game, where you look at a line and say that whole line's -2, much like I pointed out the perfection line, stop calling it that, was struggling the first 2 games. Last game, things were a struggle for St. Louis, which is weird because you have last change as the home team. The matchups should get better, and it felt like Boston got the matchups they wanted in the third game. And of course, it helps that they had those 4 power play goals. You cannot overstate that. Binnington had a 737 save percentage in that game. He has to be better. He knows he has to be better, and he'll admit that straight up. And I expect a better performance out of him. He's usually bounced back pretty darn well in these playoffs. Perron had 4 penalty minutes, and I know there were fans of the Blues that weren't happy with Perron. And it's weird, because last year I remember Vegas fans that when Perron left, they're like, well, that sucks. But, Perron, and they would go on about things that they saw in his game that they weren't happy with. So, Perron back-to-back years in the finals, and I'm hearing similar things. Fabry had 5 hits in the last game. So Robbie Fabry, who when he was drafted was expected to be an offensive dynamo, has kind of started maybe reinventing himself as, all right, I'll play my bottom 6 role that I've got to when I get in the lineup, and he's dishing out some hits, which is nice to see for a kid that's had a lot of injuries early in his career. Bortuzzo only played 9 minutes and 39 seconds, so I haven't heard anything about Dunn being in the lineup, but if Dunn were to play, he'll play more than 9:39. Bortuzzo has to be the one that would get dropped out of the lineup, and that might very well help their entire defense if you have Dunn in there playing, I would imagine, 16 minutes in the game. 7 minutes that they don't have to cover Bortuzzo. Tarasenko had 6 shots on goal. So while Tarasenko has had times in the playoffs where he's looked fantastic and times where he's looked kind of lost, he's usually generating shots. Boston will want to keep his shot totals down this next game. Binnington for the entire playoffs has a goals against a 2.54 and a 909 save percentage. Now, when we look period by period in this series, Boston has a lead in shots 28-26 in the first, 32-27 in the second. The shots favor St. Louis 29-25 in the third. And of course, they're skewed by the last game where Boston only generated 4 shots in the third period of a game that was put away thanks to that killer power play in the first and second period. Hits 118-92 in favor of the St. Louis Blues. Blocked shots, that favors Boston 50-27. Giveaways 34-23 in favor of St. Louis. They only had 7 giveaways in the last game, but Boston only had 4. Boston does not make the defensive errors that San Jose made, and that's a big part of the reason, I believe, why St. Louis is in the position they're in right now. Boston just doesn't make those errors. And I pointed out during that San Jose-St. Louis series that the Sharks seem to make a lot of defensive errors, which is, I think, part of the reason why, if I'm the Sharks right now, I'm not concerning myself with signing in Erik Karlsson. I might be more concerned about getting Šimek back and maybe picking up another defensive defenseman who won't commit turnovers. Power plays, this is where the series has been won so far. 6 for 14 for the Bruins, and St. Louis is 1 for 10. Now, yes, Boston's had 4 extra power plays through 3 games, but they've outscored them 6-1 on the power play. This penalty kill is just deadly right now, and not in the right way for St. Louis, and their power play has been anemic. That's a mix you can't have, and I pointed out before the playoffs started, if the Blues are going to win this, they're going to have to keep it 5-on-5. There were some Blues fans who said, hey, the Bruins haven't had to play against St. Louis, and St. Louis's numbers might be skewed by. Well, through 3 games, it has been special teams that's made a positive difference for Boston. We'll see if that continues in Game 4. 3 stars in the first 3 games to give a feeling for just how this series has gone back and forth. Sean Kuraly, Marcus Johansson, and Connor Clifton in Game 1. Game 2, it was Carl Gunnarsson, Vladimir Tarasenko, and Joachim Nordstrom. Game 3, Patrice Bergeron, Torrey Krug, David Pastrnak. I can tell you, if you're St. Louis, you want to see more of Kuraly, Johansson, and Clifton being the best players for Boston, and less Bergeron, Krug, and Pastrnak. Because if any of these 3 guys are a star tomorrow night, you might be down 3-1. But you take it 1 game at a time. At the very least, Craig Berube has a lot to talk to his players about in between Games 3 and 4, about here's where I think things got messed up. And the special teams coach should be sweating just a little bit. Craig Berube, who is still technically an interim coach, he's going to be the head coach, obviously. Technically still shown as an interim coach. Special teams coach, if things keep up this way, might be the one to go. Just throwing that out there. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, as always. Your winners and all this wonderful stuff. And I look forward to another day tomorrow of absolute diametrically opposed opinions on pretty much everything in the world of hockey, which happens every year in the finals. And it's part of what makes hockey fantastic. Thank you guys so much for all your support, for aiding this channel in the tremendous growth that it's had. I owe each and every one of you for that. And hey, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. Been very, very popular for people to do so over the last week. Very exciting time. And we're in for an exciting finish no matter who ends up coming out victorious. Honestly, on some level, I want this to go 7. I really do. It's been a long time. Been 8 years since we saw a final go 7. I'd kind of like to see it go 7. But let me know your thoughts about that as well. And I'll talk to you again soon.